Welcome back, MTN Giants podcast, previewing the Giants at the Seahawks here in week number 5. Giants coming at 1-3. Seattle is 3-1. It was a 6-point favorite for Seattle. Now they're favorites by 7 points. I'm sure a lot of that has to do with Malik Neighbors not clearing the concussion protocol, which is disappointing because it happened last Thursday. You figured in most cases he'd be good to go. Unfortunately, he's not. And I guess with that, we'll get into the injuries, but of course, leave a like, subscribe, all that. Let's get into it. For Seattle's injuries, the main ones are Boye Mafe, and our old friend Julian Love is questionable. Byron Murphy's out, their first-round pick of this year. I'm a big fan of his, and the Giants got lucky they dodged him. But for Mafe and Love, of course, those are big pieces to their defense. I would think they play, but of course, we'll wait and see what happens tomorrow. For the Giants, I mentioned Malik Neighbors out. That's the big one. Doubtful is Devin Singletary, which is a bit of a surprise. It wasn't like it was... I felt like Wednesday it wasn't that big of a deal he didn't practice because you figured, all right, well, maybe it's just like a Veterans Day off type of thing, but didn't practice Thursday, was limited yesterday, but Singletary is deemed doubtful, which most likely means he's out. For Andrew Phillips and Adoree Jackson, they are listed as questionable. Those are big pieces for the Giants secondary. Wan'Dale Robinson, limited with a heel injury, but he should be okay. It feels like for Seattle, this is a pretty good injury report for them. They don't have many guys questionable as compared to last week. I know a lot of their guys were out or highly questionable against the Lions on Monday night. And I guess another big piece of this game, I kind of mentioned it, but the Giants have been off since Thursday, and Seattle played Monday, so we're talking about 6 days rest versus 10 days rest. How much does that favor the Giants? We'll see. I still, as you can tell by my tone, I'm not too confident in the Giants winning this game, but I will say with the last time they played, the Giants definitely have an advantage there. As always, we'll start with Seattle's offense. Well, it's not always Seattle, but we start with the away team's offense. The new offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb, so far has been a pretty nice addition for them. Of course, Grubb was with the University of Washington last year, or the last 2 years, and seems like a big improvement over Shane Waldron, who now Bears fans can't stand, so that's kind of funny. But you see guys like even Kenneth Walker's playing better. You see Jackson Smith-Njigba's probably the big one. His route tree's definitely a lot more expanded this year as compared to last year. So we're seeing some positive affirmations from this Ryan Grubb offense. And Geno Smith, so far, he's had some turnovers, has 4 interceptions on the year, but he does lead the NFL in passing yards. So Geno Smith, I think, is playing at a pretty high level right now. Did have some mistakes on Monday night, but overall, it's a pretty scary passing offense. I think Geno is going to have a nice year when it's all said and done. Kenneth Walker was back from a 2-game absence on Monday. He looked questionable as of yesterday, but then he but he was good to go. He had this abdomen injury. And Walker, who faced a good Lions run defense last week, just abused them. It was a slow start. He was pretty quiet in the first quarter, but second half of that game, he was tremendous, had some awesome runs, reversing fields, had 3 total touchdowns. The backup running back, Zach Charbonnet, a guy that I wanted the Giants to draft a couple years ago out of UCLA, he's a pretty solid backup running back. He had a great game versus Miami a couple weeks ago when he was the starter. They have that great receiving core of Metcalf, Smith-Njigba, Tyler Lockett, even like a Jake Bobo can make plays here and there. And if the Giants are like last week without Adoree Jackson and without Drew Phillips, it's going to be a tough matchup for the Giants in that regard. The offensive line for Seattle is decent, I guess. Charles Cross, who of course was taken after Evan Neal, which in hindsight that sucks to think about, but he's been playing pretty well. He's had a really nice year 3 so far, so hopefully for his sake that continues. The right side of their offensive line is the weakest part. You have Stone Forsythe at right tackle, who's had a tough year so far. Right guard can be tough for them as well, but I think this might be a nice spot for Kayvon Thibodeau to have a good game. He looked good last week. He showed up a lot against Dallas, but I feel like this is the matchup against the right tackle who's been struggling for Kayvon to really have a nice game. Maybe you get a couple of sacks and really make a difference in this one. But overall, their offense is scary. They're going to put up a lot of points. If the Giants do have injuries in their secondary, which right now looks like a possibility, they might score 30-plus points. It would not be the most shocking thing in the world. Seattle's defense, they have a lot of good players. Of course, their new head coach, Mike McDonald, came over from the Ravens as their defensive coordinator, and aside from last week, of course, they gave up a lot of points to the Lions offense, who couldn't stop Jared Goff. He was, I think, 18 for 18 passing, had that receiving touchdown as well, which you don't see very often from Jared Goff, obviously. But Seattle, they did hold the Broncos to 20 points, the Patriots to 20 points, the Dolphins to 3 points, which of course was no Tua, but still that's impressive against anybody. And then last week they gave up 42, so that's the big outlier. But it seems like for the most part they're going to give up somewhere in the low 20s, and if the Giants even reach that, I'd be surprised because of the injuries they have offensively. It's definitely a big spot for the Giants offensive line. They have to step up in this game because the Seattle defense has good defensive linemen. As I mentioned, Byron Murphy's out. That's definitely big for the Giants, but we have a couple old friends. Leonard Williams is there. Jonathan Hankins is there. He's been off the Giants for years, but still. Jaron Reed, Uchenna Nwosu might make his season debut after missing the first 4 weeks, so unfortunately the Giants have to deal with that. And even their secondary is pretty scary. You have Tariq Woolen, of course, Devon Witherspoon, who had the pick 6 on Daniel Jones last year, Trey Brown at the other corner spot, and Witherspoon plays a lot of slot corner. But their secondary overall is awesome. Rayshawn Jenkins and Julian Love at safety. Love's turned into a good player. He had a really good 2022 season with the Giants. They didn't bring him back. I believe Love made the NFL Top 100 this past year, so he's had a nice Seahawks career so far, just, a little over a year into it. And Rayshawn Jenkins, a veteran, of course, with the Jaguars for a lot of years. He's a decent player, so their secondary's talented, their defensive line's talented. The linebackers you can definitely take advantage of, but if they have a great pass rush and they cover well in the secondary, I just don't see the Giants offense being able to do too much. So as I said, the Giants offensive line has to step up. There's no doubt about that. So far, they've been pretty good, especially in pass protection. The Giants' offensive line's been really good, which is something we have not been able to say for a long time. The run blocking, I feel like, has had their ups and downs. They've had games they've looked great. I remember versus Washington, they looked great, but even last week versus Dallas, and Dallas coming into that game had like the 30th or 31st ranked rush defense, but they could not open up any holes for their running backs, and Singletary had a rough game. Seattle so far this year has had a decent rush defense. They're ranked 13th in the NFL in yards per carry allowed, so slightly above average. But in terms of total yards allowed, they're 8th in the NFL, so a top 10 defense in yards allowed. And points against, they're top half of the league, so like their defense is playing pretty well. I expected that with a new head coach who was a defensive coordinator with the Ravens for all those years. And for the Giants defense, Seattle's offense will be tough to stop. As I mentioned, they have 2 good running backs. Kenneth Walker is a guy who can break off a lot of big runs. Got to watch out for that. I think Metcalf has 3 straight 100-yard games. I have him on a couple fantasy teams. I was big on him this year, and that's paid off pretty nicely so far. And even JSN, I think JSN's had a couple of pretty good games. He had that one big game versus the Patriots. He had like 17 targets, but last week was a good game for him, but the other 2 games were kind of quiet, so it seems like every other game JSN's been having a nice game. And for Lockett, who is a bit up there in age now, he still makes plays. He's had a decent year so far for his standards at this point in his career. I forgot to mention they have Noah Fant at tight end. He can make some big plays. He had that one big play versus the Giants last year where it was some pretty pitiful tackling. It was actually the drive that Drew Lock came in right before the halftime break. And Locke rolled out, gave it to Fant in the flat, and Fant kind of slipped a couple tackles and was like very close to scoring. So Fant's an athletic tight end, got to watch out for him. I was kind of hoping, speaking of Drew Lock, I was kind of hoping this would be a game Lock would start. It'd be such a cool revenge narrative, but unfortunately we have to watch Daniel Jones for another week. So I think going forward, like this game most likely will be a loss. I'd be surprised if they win this one. But going forward, the Giants, of course, they have some tough games coming up. You have Seattle, you have the Bengals at home, you have the Eagles at home, then you're at Pittsburgh. So 4 tough matchups here for the Giants. It's dangerous territory for a 1-3 team. If they can somehow win tomorrow, it'd be great, but I just can't see it. I really can't. So obviously when I do my spread picks, I'm most likely taking Seattle even as 7-point favorites because I just don't trust this Giants offense. I don't. And if they have injuries in the secondary, which maybe they do, maybe they don't, even if those guys play, they're still pretty banged up. So I have my concerns. I guess I might as well make the score prediction now. I think I got into everything I wanted to with this game. So if I had to guess, I'm going to say Seattle reaches like 30. I'll say they score 30 points offensively. And I will say the Giants have I'll give the Giants 17. So I'll say 30-17. Seattle wins this game. Obviously, I would take the Seahawks in the spread picks, which we'll get to. But yeah, I just feel like this will not be a fun game to watch for the Giants. I mean, no Malik Neighbors. That's like the one reason that this team has been somewhat exciting this year. But without him and playing in a tough road environment with that fan base there, it's going to be tough. So I just hope they don't make an ass out of themselves. I hope they keep it close. But still, I just don't know what to expect here. If Seattle won this game like 40-7, I don't think I'd be too surprised. It'd be more surprising if the Giants won, honestly. So they did it in 2020. I will say they went into Seattle. This was with Russell Wilson, of course, and Pete Carroll, but they went in there with Colt McCoy in 2020, and they got that big win somehow. It was a lot of Wayne Gallman and Alfred Morris on the ground, which that team was crazy. But yeah, so I've seen it done before, but I feel like this Seattle team is better than that version of the Seahawks back in 2020. So we'll see what happens. But even Geno Smith, it's a revenge game narrative for him. It's been 7 years since he's been a Giant, but still there is a little bit of a revenge narrative there. So we'll see what happens, but let's get into the week number 5 spread picks. All right, spread pick time. I forgot to do last week's results last week, so I got to be better at that. But last week we went 9-7, and shout out to the Giants for covering by half a point. I did lose 2 games by half a point. It was Atlanta minus 2.5. They won by 2. And then it was KC minus 7.5. And they won by 7. So that's unfortunate. But now up to 30-29-1 on the year. So over 500. Thank God. So for this week, we have one of those London games. The Jets at the Vikings. Vikings favored by 2.5 points. I do want to see the Jets win this game. I think it'd be nice. I mean, the Vikings have enough wins right now. They're like 4-0. Which is crazy because I think coming into the year, I predicted the Vikings to have 5 or 6 wins, so I'm taking the L on that. I'm definitely going to be wrong. For this matchup, I think I'm going to go with the Vikings, minus 2.5. That's a tough one. Part of me feels like the Jets might come out and play very well, but I just want to take the better team. It's like a neutral ground game, so I'll just take the better team. So Minnesota minus 2.5 for me. I'm going to go to the Dolphins at the Patriots. The Dolphins are favored by a point. Both of these teams are pretty bad. I think Miami has to get a win here at some point with this roster. So I'm going to go with Miami, favored by 1 point on the road there. Probably another Tyler Huntley game. The Panthers at the Bears. The Bears favored by 4 points in this one. It's a lot of points for the Bears to be favored by. I mean, it is a home game for them, and I guess their defense is very good, so I am kind of talking myself into Chicago here. Now, I'll just take the Panthers. Panthers plus 4 for me. It just seems like too many points. I feel like a rookie quarterback, and this is an Andy Dalton revenge game. People forget. He did back up Justin Fields when he was a rookie. So we have that factor. And since Dalton's been playing, I know they lost last week to the Bengals, but since Dalton's been in the starting quarterback position, this team has actually looked kind of competent. So to be a 4-point dog against the Bears team, I think I'll just take the Panthers at that point. The Colts at the Jaguars. This will be Joe Flacco starting for the Colts. Jaguars favored by 3 points. The Jaguars did cover the spread last week, but this time as favorites, it's tough to really buy into it. So I'm going to go Colts as a plus 3 on the road. I think the Colts are alive to win this game. The passing game is definitely much better with Joe Flacco. There is no Jonathan Taylor, so there is that factor as well. I think the Jaguars are without Evan Engram once again, so there are some injuries on both sides, but I do think that Flacco can pass all over this Jacksonville defense, which has not been that great this year. Buffalo Bills at the Houston Texans. A great game here. Texans favored by 1.5 points. With the injuries that the Bills have on defense, I could see a world where taking the Texans makes the most sense here. But I'm going to go against that. I'm going to take the Bills plus 1.5. The Bills are alive to win this game, of course. I would not be shocked if they did. I think Buffalo, coming off a pretty awful loss last weekend versus the Ravens, where they went in there on primetime and got blown out. Derrick Henry just almost had 200 yards against them. And I guess the good news is that the Texans don't have much of a run game, especially since Joe Mixon's been out and he's still out this week. So I feel like to beat the Bills, they have to pass all over them, which maybe they can, but I think the Bills are alive to win this, so I'll take them plus 1.5. Ravens at the Bengals. Bengals are 2-point underdogs at home here. This is a massive game for Cincinnati. I feel like if they lost this game, that kind of might be it for their chances to win this division, because then the Ravens go to 3-2. the Bengals would be 1-4. And that's a tough, some tough ground to make up there, and a tiebreaker as well. So I think with that said, I will take Cincinnati. I think they'll just be going all out to win this game, and I think it means more to them than it does to the Ravens right now. So I don't love what I've seen from Cincinnati this year, but this is just an all-or-nothing type of game for them, so I'll take Cincinnati at home here, plus 2.5. The Browns are at the Commanders. The Commanders are favorites by 3 points. I feel really tempted to take the Commanders. I feel like the Browns should have won that game last week. It was a tough loss for them. I mean, they had the 80-yard touchdown taken away. They had that awful interception that just bounced off Cooper's hands. So maybe that factors into it, but I felt like this would be a bigger spread. I figured it'd be like Washington by 4.5 or 6. Only 3 points is kind of surprising. So I think I'm just going to take the Browns. I feel like it makes no sense to take Cleveland, so I'm going to do it. I feel like that tends to work out more times than it doesn't. So I feel like there's a chance Cleveland's offense looks very good here. I'm still not sold on the Commanders' defense. I feel like with Cleveland, their offense at least looked decent last week. As I said, it should have been more because they took away that 80-yard touchdown to Cooper. So I'll just take the Browns here plus 3. Why not? The Raiders at the Broncos. Broncos favorites by 3 points. I'm going to take the Raiders. I'm kind of buying into this whole screw Devontae Adams, we could win without him type attitude. And I feel like so far that team is going to play into that. And I'm not a huge fan of Denver. I know they've won the past 2 weeks. They did win last week with Bo Nix having -7 passing yards in the first half, so I'm not completely bought in. And the Raiders are without Zamir White, which might be a good thing. So, yeah, I'll take the Raiders plus 3. Cardinals at 49ers. 49ers favorites by 7 points here. Should be a very high-scoring matchup. Arizona's looked kind of rough here the past couple weeks. I think they are due to bounce back. So, with that said, I will take Arizona plus 7 on the road here. And, yeah, I know that Arizona plays better at home offensively, but it should be good weather out there in San Francisco early in the season, so I will take them to, cover 7 points. I feel like they can do that. Here we go. Giants at Seahawks. I already said Seattle, -7. I just don't trust the Giants offense whatsoever in this game. The Packers are at the Rams. Packers are 3-point favorites. I guess I could see the Rams winning this game, but I feel like the Packers are just the much better team right now, and they're a bit healthier. So I will go Packers -3 on the road. Our Sunday night game is the Cowboys at the Steelers. A lot of people that were born in the 60s and 70s are big fans of these teams. I tend to notice that over my years. So the Cowboys are 2-point underdogs on the road here. I do want to take Pittsburgh, but I really do feel like Dak's going to have one of those games where people realize, like, oh, wow, Dak Prescott's actually kind of good at football. Like, I could just see this being like one of those 20-17 type wins for the Cowboys. And they are underdogs, but I just feel like it's going to be a tight Cowboys win. So I will take Dallas plus the 2.5 here on the road. And then on Monday night, we have the Saints at the Chiefs. Chiefs are favorites by 5.5 points. Feels like a lot for a Chiefs team that's without Rashee Rice and have no other great receiving options. I mean, yes, Kelsey is like 35 and he's all right. You'll see Worthy make a big play or two here and there, but I think I'm going to take the Saints. Yeah, I feel like that's just too much. I feel like 5.5 points is too many for a team like this. And the Saints offense might be better than the Chiefs. I mean, I know it's crazy because one team has Carr, one has Mahomes, but at least for Carr, he has Kamara, he has Olave, he has Shaheed. So they've shown like some semblance of having a great offense at times this year. I'm not expecting the Saints to go in the Arrowhead and score 40-plus points, but they can at least keep pace. And I feel like with 5.5 points here, I'm going to take the Saints. The Lions, Chargers, Eagles, and Titans are on bye, so we will not talk about them this week, but those are the spread picks for week number 5. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. We'll talk tomorrow after the Giants maybe get a win. We'll see, but I'll talk to you guys next time.